Today on the newscast, it's a new year and the Temple Mount is already heating up. Get all the breaking details next. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Happy New Year to everyone. This is our first newscast of 2023, and we look forward to having you here with us all year as we break down all of the latest events, breaking news out of the world's most chaotic and volatile region, the Middle East, and break down why it matters to you no matter where you live. Now, two things to start with today, January 3rd, 2023. Hey, number one, this is the 3-year anniversary of the death of Iranian terror master Qasem Soleimani, and the Iranian regime has been breathing threats around this anniversary in recent days, saying they still have not achieved vengeance for Soleimani's death. Remember, January 3rd, 2020, he was taken out in a U.S. drone strike ordered by then-President Trump. As Soleimani landed at Baghdad International Airport, he was eliminated. And ever since, as I mentioned, the Iranian regime has been pining for revenge. So we're keeping an eye on that on one hand, but on the other hand, the big story today is the uproar around the Temple Mount. Now, in recent months here on the newscast, we've been telling you that 2023 is going to be a very momentous year for the holiest site in the world, Jerusalem's Temple Mount, and we saw an indication of that today. Israel's new national security minister, Itamar Ben Gvir, visited the Temple Mount this morning around 7 a.m. Israel time. It was a 15-minute visit. He ascended the Temple Mount, he walked around, and then he left. Pretty uneventful, right? But not in the eyes of the likes of the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Jordan, other Arab nations, and yes, the Biden administration and France all coming together to condemn Israel over this visit by Itamar Ben Gvir. Now, just to review the status quo right now at that site, remember folks, we've described it here in the newscast, Jews are not permitted to pray atop the Temple Mount. That site is controlled by Muslim religious authorities from Jordan. They're the custodians of the Temple Mount, where the two ancient Jewish temples, Solomon's Temple and the Second Temple, Herod's Temple, once stood. Great significance, obviously, for the Jewish people, the holiest site in Judaism. God's divine presence once dwelt there in Solomon's Temple. The Ark of the Covenant was there. It's all laid out in the Bible, folks. And for Christians, look, Jesus taught in the Second Temple. That's where he chased out the money changers. So great significance for Jews and Christians, no doubt. For Muslims, it is the site today of the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So there is a great clash coming, I believe, over the Temple Mount, because there is more and more of a desire among the Jewish people not only to be able to ascend the Temple Mount, and by the way, record numbers of Jews are now ascending the Temple Mount to visit, but not only to ascend, but to be able to pray there openly. Now, right now, if a Jew prays openly on the Temple Mount, they'll either be escorted off the mount or even arrested. That's the situation. Only Muslims are right now permitted to pray atop the Temple Mount, and many, like Itamar Ben Gvir, are fed up with that status quo, and they certainly do want to change it. Now, Netanyahu says, no, we're not going to change the status quo, but folks, there seems to be a groundswell among many in Israel. And even the Jerusalem Post, which isn't a real hardcore right-wing publication, to say the least, even they published an editorial yesterday saying, yes, Itamar Ben Gvir, and any Jew for that matter, should be able to visit the Temple Mount. Now, they didn't say he should be able to pray there, but they said there should be no problem with his visit. And the problem that Arab nations, that the Biden administration had, that France had, who all issued these statements of condemnation and criticism of Israel, the problem was not a prayer. Ben Gvir did not pray. The problem was his mere visit. The mere act of a Jew visiting the Temple Mount was enough to send all of them in a tizzy. Jordan, which again is the custodian of the Temple Mount, accused Ben Gvir of, quote, storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, folks, he did not even set foot inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. As I said, he walked around the Temple Mount for about 15 minutes this morning, and then he left. That's it. It shouldn't matter whether he's a government minister, a minister of Knesset, or a regular Israeli civilian. Any Jew, any person for that matter, Jewish or non-Jewish, should be able to visit the Temple Mount without incident. And you are going to see a push, folks, no doubt, for Jews to be able to pray there. We've talked here in the newscast as well about a groundswell building for a third temple atop the Temple Mount. So we are clearly living in tumultuous times, Bible times, prophetic times. When it comes to Jerusalem, I recently interviewed Prime Minister Netanyahu. You may have seen it here in the newscast. If you missed it, December 22nd and 23rd here on the channel, back-to-back days. We posted clips from my interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was a fascinating, wide-ranging conversation. You can find it here in our archives under Israel News, back-to-back, December 22nd and 23rd, part 1 and part 2 of my interviews with the Prime Minister. And I asked him what his government would do to preserve Jewish control over Jerusalem and to strengthen the Jewish presence in God's one and only holy city, the ancient and ancestral capital of the nation of Israel. Take a look. The UN even putting forth resolutions that seem to deny the Jewish claim to Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Could you talk about why Jerusalem is so important to you personally, of course, so important to the Jewish people historically, but what are you going to do, or what are you looking to do to just solidify Jewish control in a united Jerusalem, never to be divided again?
Well, first of all, there's no question that's what we'll do. But I'm talking to you now probably about 500 meters from the Temple Mount. So Jerusalem has been our capital for 3,000 years, ever since King David proclaimed it as such. His son, King Solomon, built the temple where the Temple Mount is today. The temple doesn't stand there, but it stood there. What we have is the remnant, is what is called the Western Wall, is the rampart that contains this, really I would say the foundation of our history and in many ways our faith. This is where for 1,000 years and more, the Jewish people developed their faith, which also gave universal principles to mankind. Morality, the whole idea, man's obligations to his fellow man, the idea of a monotheistic, of a single God, unseen God. These are ideas that developed right here, right where I'm sitting. And that's been our capital for the last 3,000 years. And it took a while. And it actually is something that should be credited to President Trump, because he finally recognized what had been so obvious for so long. And I expect others to follow suit. But it's going to be a long haul, because there's an ideological straitjacket that sort of the elites, the foreign policy elites of many countries still cling to. You see that in the distorted resolutions in the UN. But that's not going to change our commitment to our ancient homeland and our ancient capital. It's going to be united under Israel, remain united under Israel. And remember that Jerusalem has a long history. When it was controlled by the Muslims, the Jews and the Christians were deprived of access to their holy places. When it was controlled by the Christians under the Crusades, the Muslims and the Jews were denied access to their holy places. The only time that all three great monotheistic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, have complete unfettered access to their holy places and freedom of religion has been under Israel. That's the real truth. And we'll have to just say it to the rest of the world until they get it.
Folks, again, I strongly encourage you to watch my entire interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu. You can find it in 2 parts right here on the channel under the Israel News category, December 22nd and December 23rd. You will find them there. Check it out. Some fascinating insights from the Prime Minister, not only about Jerusalem, but about Iran, about his influences, his inspirations, his life story. It's really an in-depth interview and perhaps a side of the Prime Minister that you've never seen before. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. Hey, it's going to be a great new year here, a great 2023 at the Watchman Newscast. We've got a lot of great stuff planned for you, so keep it right here throughout the year. Thanks for joining us today. Until tomorrow, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.